John, hey,
Hey,
congratulations on Trace, your new comic series.
thank you. Yeah, we're pretty excited.
Terrific, terrific. I've seen a few issues so far and can't wait for audiences to check it out. But, we have to ask that obligatory question is where the origination for this series came from? What planted the seed?
So, I had been, I had spent the last 6 years working on Days Gone, which was this huge open world game for Sony PlayStation. And it was a post-apocalyptic. It was about a biker named Deacon St. John, and he's kind of, roaming this freaker infested world looking for his wife. And dude, it was kind of an all-consuming task. And then when I left Sony, not long after we shipped it, I just started thinking about, you know, next gen gaming, but also open world storytelling. And what kind of a story would I want to tell that could we reach a really wide audience? I think that was my number one goal because the problem with wasn't really a problem, but it was just a choice I made early on with Days Gone. Biker culture doesn't sort of resonate with everybody, so it's kind of a niche audience. And even though zombies were popular when we started development, by the time we finished, not so much.
Hmm.
So I really thought I wanted to create a world that was not post-apocalyptic. So the thing about Trace War is it's 1,000 years in the future. So, I think I've made a joke that it's sort of post-apocalyptic in the way that Shakespeare was post-apocalyptic to the fall of the Roman Empire. I wanted that much time to have passed between the effects of global warming and the divisive politics that I see today. One of the things I always try to do in my storytelling is sort of reflect the real world, the world that I live in, and think, okay, these things are really bad that I see happening around me right now. Well, where's that going to go? And I think Trace War is kind of, the result of all those things. Getting back to a story that I feel like has wide appeal. In some ways, dude, it's a superhero story. It really is. Because Ash Naranjo is this kid who's born with horrible birth defects, result of the trace, which is this mysterious, pockets of dark energy that have sort of descended around the entire globe. And, sort of following him as he's dealing with these implants that have been given to him that, in a society that sort of distrusts technology and science, it makes his life really, really hard. But on the other hand, he also has these amazing things that he can do that no one else can do. So in some ways, I do think of it as sort of a far future superhero action adventure.
So tell us about the world that you actually created for Trace here. It is still Earth, and a lot of the ideas is around what the Pacific Northwest, where you're from. Could you
Yeah.
tell about the world that you created for the series, and is it just isolated in that area?
Yeah, it's 100% isolated in this area because the entire story is told through the eyes of Ash Naranjo. And I really wanted to focus on his world, his home, all there's no more global governments, let alone the United States. Everything's been sort of reduced down to these little political fiefdoms. I call them enclaves, which are, maybe the size of a county. And I chose the Pacific Northwest for the same reason I did for Days Gone, which is it's kind of an underutilized setting, and it's got really, really a lot of biodiversity. You can go from, especially in the future, I can kind of, morph it to be whatever I need it to be. But you've got high desert and coastlines and, mountainous terrain, volcanoes. The Ring of Fire plays an important part of the story. And yeah, I think it is recognizable in the sense that if you live in this area, you're going to be able to walk around and say, oh, yeah, I recognize, that part of the Seattle coastline, but the actual, Seattle's underwater, for example. So you're not going to be able to recognize a lot of man-made landmarks because it's just changed too much.
Now, of course, the residents of this new world, you have there is a war between two factions, but you also have I want to say mutants and cannibals also living in this world. Can you talk about the different types of groups and factions in this world?
Yeah, so so one of the things I really tried to do was make it so that it wasn't just black and white, good and evil, that there's going to be a dark side to every single political organization in the world, including the one that Ash belongs to, which is the Order of Life Science. It's an ancient organization that is trying to preserve, kind of founded on the precepts of Carl Sagan, and one of his famous quotes, which was a driving force behind the story, is his fear that the United States was going to descend into superstition. And, I kind of see that happening today, with anti-vaxxers and all that. But they have a dark side. They have secrets. They're willing to do things that, you and I might not be willing to do to maintain their goals. And I think the same thing is definitely true of their opposition, the Freelanders, which is kind of an Orwellian way of saying that these guys say that they're freeland, they say they're for freedom, but they're really for freedom on their terms, which means do it the way we do it, or don't do it at all. So um, the same thing with every other political organization, and there's many, and there's lots of infighting, there's lots of backstabbing and so on. I take a lot of inspiration from George R. Martin in that regard. The early books for Song of Fire and Ice, I think, are just amazing in terms of his ability to create political factions that each have their own perspective. And some ways they're all valid, but they're at cross purposes. As far as the mutants, they're a direct result of the trace. So far, the only thing we've ever talked about is fauna. So, one of the things I really need, especially, and this is a direct result of storytelling, both in comics and in games, is you need things to fight. You need to have conflict and things to make the world dangerous. So, that's one of the things that I think that why games lends itself to comic book storytelling, is because it demands a lot of action. And you have to be able to have Ash. He's got to have things he's trying to accomplish, but there's got to be things in his way. And if you've read a couple of issues, and maybe you've seen the issue with the Rager, not the Rager bear, but the giant mutated animal. I mean, these things are really hard to kill. They're regenerative. They're very powerful. They're not like, a regular bear that you would find in the Pacific Northwest today. So yeah, mutated monsters are a pretty huge part of it. Cannibals, I have a whole storyline with the cannibals, because again, that's one of the things that I find fascinating, because I definitely, and I've done some study on world history. A lot of times cannibalism kind of has nothing to do with being hungry. It's everything about ritual and trying to, consume the soul or the essence of your enemy. And so, I wanted to play with that a little bit in this, because I hadn't seen that done in this kind of a setting.
Of course, you're probably not going to answer to me what is a trace, besides it's a dark energy, but it's the mystery that that's going to probably hold a lot of answers in these issues. Am I correct?
Oh, 100%. And I think the thing I like about the trace itself is it's my one science fiction element, right? We're far future. There's a lot of technology that we don't have today, but it's all plausible. And I think everything that I'm extrapolating is plausible. The one thing that's probably not plausible is the trace, which is, these pockets of dark matter. But I know it could happen, right? So anyway, it's the one thing that allows me narrative freedom to turn the world into something that is, very bleak in many ways, but has the promise, I think, of huge gains for humanity if they can figure out what it is and figure out how to mitigate its bad effects. And yeah, it's the whole book is built around it. So right now, like Days Gone was a 60-hour game with 6 hours of movies, and Trace War would be about the same, maybe a little bigger. So it's a big story.
I'm fascinated because you've done quite a character development for Ash, particularly going into his background, possibly into his family, and also Ash itself, because in any comic books or video games, the primary character has to have some kind of powers, but he has what they call a TechGyn. And
Yeah.
could you talk about his powers and his background, or tease? I'm sure comic book readers want to be teased about.
Yeah. So yeah, again, that's one of the things that you'll sort of discover as you get farther along in the story. I kind of hint that the Order is the ones, the organization that Ash belongs to. They're the ones that are sort of developing this technology. We don't know much about it in the first few issues of the comic, except that it's very powerful. It is is sentient in a way because it's driven by an engram that Ash was given as an infant in order to help him control these implants. So these implants kind of grow structurally as he grows, and his sentient implant grows as well. So without Mari is her name, he wouldn't be able to control his arms and or his eye or the other sensory implants that he has. So it's really it's superhuman strength, but it's also modular. And again, this is kind of the synergy between comics and games. I'm always thinking more as a game designer as I think as a narrative designer and a writer. I'm thinking like, okay, what, gameplay wise, what this would be is you've got your implant arms and you've got modules that you can upgrade and you can swap things in and out. So, you've got like this nano fiber thread zip line that you can have, or you've also got the ability to plug in a charger and allow and get recharging from the sun. So there's all kinds of devices. It's kind of like Batman's utility belt in that way. So lots of ways that Ash in the comic series can have different devices, and also that stuff can be stripped away from him if he gets in a bad situation, and then he's a lot more helpless. So it's kind of like putting a kryptonite necklace around Superman if they somehow can disable Ash's arms, because that's where most of his power is.
Absolutely. And John, personally, because with Trace and with Days Gone, there's the influences of the motorcycle culture into both the video game that you worked on and this comic book series. How are you a motorcyclist? Is that
Dude, I used to be. So I used to ride a bike from the time I was 17 until I was about 23. I stopped riding because I was on the fast lane outside of Tacoma on my Honda 750 going 90 miles an hour when my chain broke, and came within literally a hair of being killed on the Seattle freeway. And that's kind of what made me realize, because I was young, I was married, had a couple of kids, and I realized, yeah, okay, my bike days are probably over, because I don't think people realize how really dangerous it is. I mean, it's just you're taking your life in your hands every time you get on a bike, and it's not just because of mechanical failure, but other drivers just don't pay attention. So yeah, I used to love bikes. I miss them terribly, but no, I'm no longer in the bike culture. But what I love about bikes, and the reason why Ash has a bike, is not to copy Deacon. It's because to me, it makes the most sense for this kind of world. If you're living in a world where energy is not plentiful and you just need to get around, and the environment is, it's a rough environment. It's constantly changing because of all the volcanic activity, and all of the highways are not like what we have today. So it just is a way of getting from one place to another where flight's not available. Bikes make a lot of sense, a lot more sense than large vehicles.
most excellent? And the plan for the Trace series here is just 6 issues, or do you have more ideas and thoughts after that?
Oh, I'm working on the second 6 issues right now. So
Oh,
there's enough story here for a pretty long comic series. I'm not sure what the publishing plans are currently. You'd have to do a follow-up question with Nate and Mike and see what they have planned.
well, that brings me up to the idea of the series itself. Could you talk about the team behind it? Because I want to say your penciling and your artwork is fantastic. I mean, this is beautiful art.
Yeah, dude. So that's all. My producer Nate is the guy who put this team together, and he has a huge Rolodex in the comics industry. I can tell you this much: I can tell you that working with Paul Pelletier has been a joy. The guy is the penciler, and he took all of because the way I write comics is I write full script, so I have a ton of detail on every page. But Paul has the freedom to kind of go in and massage that to say, well, this would flow better if this were 8 panels instead of 6, or whatever. And his ability to draw exotic locations and characters and creature types and environments is just spot on. And I think what I think about the book. I don't know if you noticed this, but what I like about the book and the way it looks is it's pretty different than any other book out there. In other words, it's got kind of more of a Star Wars vibe than it does a Marvel vibe or Image, in that it focuses on I think the camera's pulled back more than it is in a lot of comics, so that you're seeing a lot more of the characters in the setting, and not so many close up beauty shots of the characters. So I like his style. I love the way and I think all the guys are really good. I think the inks are amazing, the colors are amazing, and it just all kind of came together. I think it's kind of the perfect team for this book.
Most excellent. And as I'm about to wrap things up, I understand you launched a Kickstarter. It's already live from my understanding.
Yeah, it's live right now.
Yeah, so could you talk about that, and what do you want to accomplish with this Kickstarter?
Well, what we've been trying to do with Lethos and Trace War from the beginning is just engage across as much media as we can. Consider it a transmedia IP. Mike put together with Michael Lee this TikTok series. He's a huge influencer with millions of followers. So we did a 6-episode thing with him, just trying to reach out to as many demographics as we can. So Kickstarter was just another way of trying to reach a wider audience, trying to get more people involved. We've also been transparent about our process from the beginning. We're constantly sending out images of covers and, like doing interviews like this where I'm talking more in depth about the story. When I was in games, dude, nobody talks about anything until it's almost ready to launch. That's just the way games are. They're very tight-lipped, and they sort of dole information out just a little bit at a time. And we kind of want to be more transparent and get people to sort of get excited about Trace War as we go, and not just try to do it in one big launch.
So in this case, what is your targeted launch for people to obtain issues as they anticipate the?
Dude, that's a really good question. Again, I'm afraid I don't have the publishing information in front of me at all. So I think Ryan can get that to you after this and give you more information on the publishing schedule. I just don't know.
You're just teasing us and trying to build up that base, aren't you?
I'm just so focused on world building and writing the scripts and just trying to get the story done, that I kind of let the marketing and PR side of it go to. They park me in front of a computer like this for an interview, but other than that, I'm focused solely on writing right now.
I completely understand. And one last thing, John, is the realm of video games, have you left that behind and entered into the comic book industry, or is that still a possibility for you down the road?
No. We're still developing Trace War as an open world game. So I'm doing both at the same time, and they kind of go hand in hand. So as I'm world building and fleshing out the settings and the storylines and the characters, I'm always thinking of this setting and what it's going to mean for the finished game. And by the way, I've done comics and games my entire life, both of them at the same time. So in the 80s, I was part of the black and white comics revolution that was kind of ushered in by Eastman and Laird's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I published some black and white comics myself in the 80s, but then in 1990, I got a job at Dynamics, a very early computer game company. And all throughout my career, I've done comics and I've done video games. So it's kind of been part of my life since I was a kid, and I'm not giving either up.
Do you have a side that you like better in terms of the industry?
Currently I prefer comics only because it takes a much smaller team to get it done. Like I said, it took a team of 100 people at Ben Studio to do Days Gone over 6 years for one game. And that didn't include the entire worldwide team, which was probably, 1,000 people to do everything else. So you're talking about a massive undertaking. The great thing about comics is you can just have a handful of talented people, and you can create something that's pretty amazing. And you can do it in a much shorter time scale. So I definitely prefer that part of comics, at least currently.
No, I enjoy comics too, because I don't have to wait as long rather than, waiting 6 years for a complete storyline.
Yes, exactly.
Well, John, I've taken enough of your time. I do really appreciate you carrying your conversation about Trace. And could you tell us for audiences where they could seek out more information if they're interested, and maybe they will have to sign up for your newsletter for big announcements?
Definitely. So the best place to go is www.lithos.com, Liithos. And then Ryan can give you the address to the Kickstarter, because that's the thing we're plugging really hard right now, because it's only going to be up for another 28 days. And if they want to be part of the process and get all these really cool gifts that are part of the supporting process, there's some really cool stuff on offer, including my motion comic. So I learned Unity last year, so I could recreate the first issue of the comic with sound and music and animation, and it turned out pretty cool.
Well, that does sound pretty cool. I too gonna have to check that out. I mean, this is exciting. Well, John, thank you very much for this talk, and hopefully we get to do this again down the road.
Absolutely. Thanks, Gig.